Today, we're going to dive into the story of one of history's greatest leaders, right at the peak of his power. But here's the twist. This isn't a story about his greatest victory. Nope. It's about what happened when his most passionate dream got completely and totally shut down, and how that rejection ended up redefining his entire legacy. So let me just start by asking you something. Imagine you've worked your whole life for one thing. It's your ultimate goal, your passion project. And right when you're on the verge of making it happen, you get a hard, definitive no. What do? Well, that's the exact spot we find King David in, and trust me, his answer is probably not what you'd expect. Okay, so let's set the stage. King David has finally, after all this fighting, brought peace to his kingdom. He's this celebrated warrior, and he's living in a gorgeous palace made of cedar. But something's nagging at him. It just doesn't feel right. While he's living in luxury, the Ark of the Covenant, which is the very symbol of God's presence, is still just sitting in a simple, temporary tent. This contrast just sparks this grand vision in David. He's got to build a magnificent, permanent temple for God. And what's really cool here is where David's priorities are. I mean, the previous king, Saul, had totally neglected worship. But David, his first thought is to honor God. His number one project is to bring the Ark of the Covenant, this sacred chest that represents God's throne on earth, out of the shadows and put it right back in the center of the nation's life. So this whole temple idea, it's not some ego trip. It's coming from a really genuine heart for God. But before he can even start drawing up blueprints for a temple, he's got to get the Ark to Jerusalem first. And his first attempt to do that, well, it becomes this powerful and frankly painful lesson. It's a moment that teaches David a hard truth. Good intentions, even the absolute best of them, aren't always enough. So picture this. The whole nation is celebrating. There's music, dancing. It's a massive parade. The energy is electric. Everyone's motives are pure. Their spirits are soaring. They think they're doing this great thing for God. It feels like a national holiday, a real moment of triumph. And then, in a split second, the party turns into a nightmare. The oxen that are pulling the carts stumble. A man named Uzzah, probably just on pure instinct, reaches out his hand to stop the sacred ark from tipping over. And for that, he dies. Right there on the spot. The music just screeches to a halt. The celebration is over, and everyone is just standing there, confused, terrified, and completely heartbroken. So, what on earth went wrong? Well, David, in all his excitement, he missed a critical detail. You can think of it like missing a no parking sign. God had given really specific instructions, let's call them divine traffic rules. The ark was never supposed to be put on a cart. It was so holy, it had to be carried on special poles by the Levites, the tribe that was set apart for this exact job. David learned a tough lesson that day. Your enthusiasm can never, ever replace obedience to God's specific commands. And this just lays out the difference perfectly, right? The first attempt, done the wrong way with the cart, total disaster. But after that painful lesson, David organizes a second try. This time, though, he follows God's instructions to the letter. And the result? A successful, joyful procession that's filled with real worship and incredible blessing. You see, for 3 months, the ark ended up staying in the home of a guy named Obed-Edom, and his entire household experienced these unbelievable blessings. This was the sign David needed. It was like a light bulb went off. He realized God's presence isn't the problem. The method was the problem. When you honor God the right way, his presence brings life, not death. And that gave him the courage to try again, but this time by the book. Okay, so lesson learned. The ark is now safely in Jerusalem. The worship system is up and running. So now David's finally ready to go after his ultimate dream, building that magnificent temple. He's at the absolute height of his power, and he feels like this is it, it's time. David goes to God with his plan, and the answer he gets is direct. It's unambiguous. It's no. And the reason is just stunningly personal. God basically tells him, you're a man of war. You've shed too much blood, so you will not be the one to build a house for my name. I mean, can you imagine the irony? The very thing that made him a great king, his skill as a warrior that made the kingdom safe, was the one thing that disqualified him from his greatest personal dream. And here's the crucial point. God had these really distinct roles for David and his son Solomon. David's job description? He was the warrior. His mission was to establish peace, even if it meant through conflict. That was necessary work. But building God's house, that was a job for a man of peace, which his son Solomon would be. David's role was to create the safety and security so that Solomon could then build in peace. Now, this right here is the most remarkable part of the whole story. How does a guy like David respond to a dream-crushing no like that? Does he get bitter, resentful? Does he just give up? No way. He pivots. He completely changes his mission. If he can't be the builder, then fine. He'll become the greatest preparer the world has ever seen.
And when I say he prepared, I mean it was on an absolutely epic scale. He basically dedicated the rest of his life to gathering all the materials for this temple he would never get to build himself. We're told he gathered so much gold, silver, and bronze that it was almost impossible to even measure it all. He was going to make sure his son Solomon had absolutely everything he could possibly need.
And it wasn't just about materials. He laid all the groundwork for the project. I mean, think about this. When Solomon finally took over, he mobilized a workforce of over 150,000 people. A logistical feat of that size would have been completely impossible without the decades of detailed planning and resource gathering that David had already put in place. But it wasn't just about rocks and wood, you know? His planning went deeper. He focused on the people. He organized this professional class of 288 highly skilled musicians and singers. Then, he split them up into 24 different shifts to make sure that once the temple was built, there would be nonstop 24/7 worship. See? This wasn't just about building a structure, it was about building a culture. Now, let's just pause on this for a second, because this is wild. Most leaders, especially kings, would hide their disqualifications. They'd spin the story to make themselves look good. But David does something totally radical. He gathers all the leaders of the nation and tells them the plain, unvarnished truth. God told me no, and here's exactly why. He doesn't hide a thing. And the impact of that kind of transparency, it was huge. It completely broke the political culture of only sharing good news. It modeled a level of integrity and humility that was just unheard of. And when people saw his genuine passion, even in rejection, it inspired the entire nation to give generously to the project. It shifted the whole focus away from David's personal legacy and onto God's bigger plan. And this gets us to the real heart of the matter. David understood something incredibly profound. He wasn't just preparing for a physical building. He was actually building something far more important, something you couldn't even see. Let's call it the invisible temple. David realized the stone and the gold were just a tool. The real temple, the one that truly matters, was the spiritual life of the people. He wasn't just planning a building, he was building a community of worshipers, a nation of living stones. And that makes sense, right? After all, the physical temple would one day be destroyed, but the people's relationship with God, that was meant to last forever. So this is the true temple that David built. He created the software before the hardware was even constructed. He didn't just pile up gold. He built the entire human infrastructure. He organized all the priests into their divisions. He scheduled the worship shifts for 24/7 coverage. He appointed treasurers and gatekeepers for security. He trained a professional class of musicians. And then finally, he passed the entire divine blueprint over to Solomon, handing him a project that wasn't just funded, but was fully staffed and ready to launch from day one. So, how do we bring this ancient story into our lives today? What's the takeaway? What's the blueprint for our own legacy? I mean, really think about it. How do you respond when that promotion goes to someone else? When a project you poured your soul into gets canceled? When a personal dream is just flat out denied? Do you get better, or do you pivot? And maybe even more important, what does it look like to pour your energy into preparing the way for someone else to succeed? Your kids, your coworkers, the next generation. In the end, David offers us this totally revolutionary idea of what success looks like. Maybe, just maybe, a true legacy isn't found in the monuments we build for ourselves. Maybe our greatest and most lasting impact is actually found in what we faithfully prepare for others to build upon.